The Iorì was a podcast channel is brought to you by First Nations Fiber. Welcome to the Iorì was a front page podcast. In this episode, we speak with Montreal area journalist Christopher Curtis, who's currently in Lviv, Ukraine, covering Russia's invasion of the country.
First Nations Wireless is now First Nations Fiber. You've seen our team working through the community to get you connected. From the new development to the OCR, from the 207 to Clay Mountains, FN Fiber makes fiber optic internet easy for everyone. Coming to Ganhawaga soon. Visit radio.fnfiber.com to sign up today.
Hey, what's up, man?
Hey, how's it going?
A little homesick, but I'm happy to be doing that.
Yeah, where's your rental car?
I left it in a parking lot used by, I think, bus drivers.
Okay.
And I haven't heard back. So, I said, my fixer put this is hilarious. My fixer put the keys on a bus, and the driver drove it to Poland because he was going there anyways, and then they went to get it. So I don't know what this is going to cost me in the end. But we'll see. Yeah, it's a real adventure.
We're joined by Montreal area journalist Christopher Curtis, who is currently covering the war in Ukraine. Christopher, how and why did you make this decision to head out to Ukraine to cover this war?
Well, I think like a lot of people, I saw it as something that was going to become a gigantic humanitarian crisis. When it became clear that the Russian army was kind of just indiscriminately bombing cities. And I guess I listened to a report on BBC, and I heard these children crying, and I have a kid now. I've got a daughter. She's 5 months old, and I just, and then I kind of started inquiring about what it would take to go over there. Reached out to a contact in the military, and they passed on some information they introduced me to a fixer. I spoke to the fixer, and then she told me that, she's in the western part of the country. She talked about her daughter, and then I thought her daughter and mine are roughly the same age, and it was why is it she has to be in danger and mine can be safe? Why is it that these kids are in I just you feel sometimes you believe in something and you kind of have to act on those convictions, and I think that's what it was, and luckily my partner's been really supportive, and my family too. So I just thought I'll go there and tell stories kind of the way that I like to tell stories, and hopefully just bring a little bit more humanity to the coverage, and that's what I've been trying to do.
For people who might not know the term, can you explain what a fixer is?
Oh yeah, so a fixer is someone who helps reporters get in touch with interpreters, helps them kind of set up local contacts. My fixer got me this hotel here and helps me find people that I might want to speak to. I'll ask her to, find me an orphanage or kind of direct me towards refugee camps. So I pay her, and she helps me do a lot of my journalism. And I work with this interpreter. His name's Dan. And, he's a huge part of the story is how hard Dan works with me to make sure that I understand what people are saying and that they understand the questions that I'm asking. And he gives me a lot of context about what life is like in Ukraine for most people, and that's what a fixer is, and that's what facilitates all of our reporting on the ground. Just about everyone here has one.
So where exactly are you in Ukraine now?
It's probably the only really big city that's safe. It's called Lviv. It's near the border with Poland, and it's about 500 kilometers west of Kiev, and or Kiev is how the Ukrainians pronounce it. It's a really nice city. It's got a beautiful old part to it, lots of Gothic architecture and a mix of Polish settlements. The Germans have occupied the city. The Russians have occupied the city. It's a very interesting place.
Can you explain the process and the journey that you went through to get there? Because it could not have been easy, right?
Yeah, it's hard to get into a war zone. Yeah. So I had to first of all, I had to sort of make sure that I had a place to stay here and that, because this is where most of the refugees end up, is in this city. And, I'm in a hotel, but there's 6 to a room in some, in some rooms, and there's a lot of refugees here. Some of them sleep on the couch in the lobby. It's this huge, humanitarian crisis. Anyways, I took a plane to Paris, and then from Paris took a plane to Krakow in Poland. And then from Krakow, Poland, I rented a car, and I tried to get over the border, but they realized that I was driving a rented car, and they told me to turn around, which was really kind of like upsetting. But then I turned around and parked the rented car in like a bus depot. Managed to find some truckers who were delivering supplies to the front, and one of them was nice enough to let me hitch a ride with him. And then they dropped me off here in Lviv. You know, we crossing the border is very, very long. On the way out of Ukraine, at some point, I think the line was something like 20 or 30 kilometers long to cross the border. You know, half of the 2 million people who've left so far are children. So they would line up for like 30 hours and you know, hope that they could get across. It's really difficult to see, you know, because when you're right there, you know, you're like 5 or 6 feet from you know, some kid who, you know, she smiles and you see gums where her teeth used to be because she's just a kid and she's lost her baby teeth, and you just kind of, you feel a great sense of shame that there's not much you can do for her, and that maybe you haven't been doing enough, and so. Yeah, so it's been an ordeal getting here, but you know, leaving for these people is terrifying and a really difficult journey that takes them through war zones, and a lot of them have been fired at by Russian forces or bombs. So, you know, I believe some have driven over landmines. It's really, really scary for them.
On the news, we're hearing a lot about how the Russian military are doing two things, you know, that I think people should be concerned about, is targeting civilians, and the other is targeting journalists. How safe do you feel while you're there?
Well, I feel pretty safe because I'm so far away from all the bad stuff. I believe there was a rocket headed for Lviv that was intercepted by their air missile defense, but we're pretty safe in Lviv. It's probably the safest part of Ukraine right now, so I'm not in any real danger. We are under martial law, so like at where we write our stories, there's like cops milling about, and you know, there's checkpoints everywhere, so you're constantly asked to show your passport and your press credentials and like, you know, sudden movements. But on the front, you know, yeah, journalists are dying. I believe 2 Dutch journalists were shot and killed at the beginning of the conflict. There have been other shootings. I don't know if they were fatal, but it's really dangerous. And this is a dictator, a despot that doesn't value human life very much, obviously, and so it becomes even more essential to tell the truth, and you know, to try not to get caught up in the propaganda war between both countries, because really, I mean, Russia is waging a terrible, terrible dehumanizing propaganda campaign. I mean, when you say that Ukrainians aren't a real people and they're not a real nation, you know, that's and you're targeting civilians, it's kind of like that's how ethnic cleansing starts. And so it's so on the one hand, you know, that's just like really, really terrible, but you know, at the same time, to kind of rally the country, there's propaganda everywhere. You know, there's these posters where the catchphrase Russian warships, fuck off. You know, that was something that a border guard said to a Russian warship, and he was shot at the beginning of the war. And then, you know, there's another propaganda poster that's a woman in a traditional Ukrainian dress, and she has a gun in Putin's mouth, and it says, "Don't call me honey." There's another one of a Russian soldier being kind of like dying and melting into the soil, and it says, "You're not coming on our soil, you're going into it." And so it's very like there is a lot of just really ratcheted up. All the news agencies here, the TV news agencies, have combined to form kind of one channel, and it's very patriotic. And you know, I think the flag is always there, and so you're trying to parse the information as much as you can and try and get to some kind of true reflection of what's happening. You know, you really can't trust the number of casualties being listed on either side. You have to try and independently verify. I mean, obviously, one thing that's true for sure is civilians are dying. They're being slaughtered in some cases, and you know, the hospital was targeted the other day, and you know, 2 million people plus have fled the country. So this is very quickly becoming one of the worst, you know, humanitarian crises in Europe since World War II, or the Balkans. So it's, you know, obviously Syria is also included in this too. That was terrible as well. So it's really something. It's really it's a lot for the mind to handle right now.
You talk about the civilians that are being affected. How are they viewing this conflict?
Well, it's weird because in the East, where the violence, the worst of the violence is happening, a lot of these civilians have relatives in Russia or friends in Russia. They're talking to their friends in Russia, saying like we're under attack, we're being shelled, and sometimes friends and relatives won't believe them that they're being shelled, or that they're being shot at, or that they're being killed, or they don't care. They say that this is good for Ukraine. Ukraine's going to be free, just like Russia. And so there's a really kind of weird unreality happening as the crisis unfolds. And you see people show up to the city of Lviv with all they have left in the world, a suitcase, maybe a pet. In most cases, it's mothers with their children because the men have stayed behind to fight. And, the kids are, some of them are just kids. They're playing, they're having fun. And some of them are just very obviously rattled and scared and traumatized. And, it isn't uncommon to take the bus in the city and you see someone burst into tears, or you're at a restaurant and the same thing happens. Because weirdly, like, life kind of goes on during this crisis. People go to their jobs and the city still has restaurants and it still has grocery stores and gas stations, even though there's huge lineups to get fuel, and some gas stations don't even have fuel anymore. Life is kind of moving on, but there are these constant reminders about the cost of this war. I was sitting down with an interpreter I was working with, and he checked his phone, and the other night he said, two of my friends are dead. And it's just really, it's hard to fathom the depth of pain that a lot of these people are going through, and the fear and the uncertainty about what tomorrow holds for them, and whether they'll still have a country in a year or 2 years or even several months or whatever. It's really it's quite terrifying for them.
Is COVID even a concern to them right now?
I mean, some people wear masks. I have not seen a lot. I think they've kind of put that on the back burner. I visited a children's hospital today, and no one was really wearing masks. But their priority is wounded children or children who were in intensive care for whatever reason before the war in the East, and they had to be moved to hospitals in the West. And it's like that's the crazy thing is to see a child who had his leg amputated. I didn't see this child, but you talk to someone who treated him, and they like that's where all of their medical attention is going, is just to treat the war wounded and to try and provide care for those who really needed it over there and had to evacuate or die. I mean, they targeted a hospital just the other day, a maternity ward just the other day. It's really like, at once you see the very worst of humanity, and then you see a lot of people helping and going out of their way to save other people, and you see the best of humanity, and it's really confusing for your brain and your mind and your heart to see all these contradictory things at the same time.
What are some of the things that stand out to you that 5 years from now, 10 years from now, that you're going to look back at your time in Ukraine covering this war?
I think seeing kids lying in a train station, sleeping on the floor, or seeing kids lined up at the border in the freezing cold. It was miserably cold one night, and they're just crossing, not really knowing what's going to happen. Seeing a baby in her mom's arms in the middle of winter, and on the Polish border, just praying that she'll get on a bus, and seeing children with like their cute little bunny ear toque and their little cartoon character winter coats, and just seeing them struggle for their lives, and just you wonder what the future holds for these kids. I mean, I met a family, and the kid is just like mute and rattled and doesn't know what's happening, and he's beautiful little boy and called Kirill, and you just the things that he's seen on his journey west are terrifying. And then visited a refugee camp the other day, and on the way in I saw this table. I didn't know what it was, so I approached it, and it was all like a box cutter, a kitchen knife, hammer, a can of pepper spray, and like these are the weapons they confiscated from the women and children who were fleeing the big cities because that's all they had to defend themselves against. Like if they were so worried they were going to die that they had to grab something, and they had like a box cutter against cruise missiles or whatever, and that never like that's never going to be normal to me. That and I really don't like. I think there have been moments that have hit me, but for the most part, and this, you've reported on difficult things, Greg, that like you kind of shut down to be able to focus on the story. But it'll sink in later, and I intend on taking a bit of time off when I get home because I just want to be with my kid and my partner and just like feel like myself again.
You're doing this for yourself too, for your own outlet, and you're not freelancing for anybody else, or you haven't been sent there by a major media outlet, correct?
Yeah. I mean, like I was talking to someone from a TV station, and they hire security experts to get them in the country, and they and of course, like because it's dangerous and because you want your people to be safe. But I kind of came on a shoestring budget, but I think it's important, and I think that I was worried that the coverage that would come out of Ukraine would just be like cheerleading for this war, and I can understand how we get caught up in that, but I just really wanted to focus on the human cost and what war looks like. And to me, war looks like a child in the cold waiting to cross the border. To me, war looks like a parent who doesn't know if she'll ever see her husband again because she had to leave him behind and take the kids to safety. That's what's gonna rattle me forever is just this idea that we as human beings can do these things to each other. And so I knew that if I came here, it wasn't going to be easy, but I knew that like these are the kinds of stories that I tell and that I want to tell, and that I want to try and share with a bigger audience so we can pay closer attention and be very vigilant about the cost of this kind of war and this kind of conflict and what it means for people to fight for their freedom and how dangerous it might be that it descends into something much worse, and it just both sides end up hating each other and it turns into a long like super bloody war. So I'm sorry, like it was a very simple question, but I went off in a million directions.
Oh no, that's fine. I mean, that's what we're here for, right? To talk and to tell the story. There's a story. There's many stories behind what's going on and over in Ukraine. And if there's one story that you want our listeners to know, or our readers to know about what's going on there, is there anything that you want to relay to them?
It's hard to I know a lot of people in your community have served in the armed forces in the United States and in Canada. So I know a lot of the people in your community understand the sacrifices that soldiers make. So I think that they would probably understand a lot of this more than I ever would. But I think that it really puts things in perspective. And I say this as a white Canadian who hasn't experienced genocide. I mean, you have, what it is to almost lose your language, and what it is to have your rights and your territory infringed upon. So for me, it's a wake up call that a lot of the things that we complain about in our daily lives are meaningless. But for someone in Guinea-Gahaga territory, like I don't know what lessons that I could ever teach them about humanity and humility, because I think they know all of them. But I would say that there's a good chance that we'll see some of these refugees, and there's a good chance that they're going to need our help in some way. And that maybe the one lesson that's kind of become really clear to me is that I don't want to be angry anymore, and I don't want to I don't want to be mad about this. I want to open my heart and just like find a way to show the survivors of this love and to find a way to help and to find a way to be a part of the solution that doesn't involve just me getting angry. And I think it's helped give me perspective. I hope that I get to keep that when I get home and don't just become a big whiner again. I miss home a lot right now, as I haven't been gone very long, but I miss home, and I consider Ganawage like a part of my home. Like I don't live there, but it feels like something that I miss. And I just want to say that I miss you, and I miss everybody in your community. And I really hope that we all get to see each other soon.
Where can people read about what you're covering?
I have a newsletter, and it's at a website called Rover, ROVER, .substack, SUBSTACK, and if you want to check it out, there it is. And I'm trying to post at least one dispatch every day. I think I've written 5 pieces so far. I'm probably going to write one about orphans tomorrow, and so I'm just going to try and keep at this until I leave on Sunday or Monday.
Thank you very much for your time. Stay safe out there.
Absolutely, Greg. I always appreciate you, man. You're a great journalist and a great friend. No, man.
Thanks for listening to the Iorì wase Front Page podcast. Be sure to check out our other podcasts like Iorì wase Profiles, Meatheads, and The Beating Table on Google and Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
The views and opinions of the guests expressed in this podcast do not reflect those of Iorì wase and its employees.